So good evening. If we have anybody standing, I don't think we do, but if you do, we do have another room where the presentation can be seen right down the hall, if you'd like to do that. My name is Dean Trefethen. I am the Planning and Community Development Director for the City of Laconia. With us tonight is Commissioner of the Department of Administrative Services, Charlie Arlinghouse. Also with DAS is Jerry Nyland, who is the Real Property Asset Manager. And we have two gentlemen from CBRE, which is the company that the state chose to market the property. We have Trouty Vaughn and Mark Beazold. And at this point in time, I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Arlinghouse.
I'm gonna wander on this way.
All right.
Hi, I'm Charlie Arlinghouse. I'm the Commissioner of Administrative Services for the state. Sorry. I think it wants me here. And I want to introduce, I'm not going to tell you many of the substantive things, but I want to talk about a little bit about what's going on, where we've been, where we're coming from, where we're going. And you know better than most people in the state that there is this lovely piece of property on Route 106 that has some wonderful things about it and some problematic things about it. And that what we would like to do is make it a more productive and interesting part of the city and the state of New Hampshire. I want to say that this is something that people have looked at for decades. You know, there's a study committee in something like 2015. Corrections was up there for a while. I'm not going to go into the history of the state school. There were a lot of people at the state school who did a lot of nice things. There are a lot of people at the state school who didn't. As the parent of a child with a developmental disability, I don't want to think about that too much. But there's an enormous opportunity for the state here. I want to start with this: the creation of the Lakeshore Redevelopment Planning Commission in 2017 or 18, 17. And there are a lot of people who did a lot of great work, and Terry Spanner is obviously one of them. But George Ball was the chairman of it, and Bob Cheney, and a lot of people who did some work on that. We would not be here today without the work that group did, and they toiled endlessly for a long time, and to allow us to know what some of the unknowns are about the property, know what some of the knowns are about the property, do a lot of testing, do a lot of the due diligence, all of which was a prerequisite and absolutely necessary to any possible sale and redevelopment of this property. And it is without their work, we wouldn't even be talking today. And I want to say that because I don't want to lose sight of that, that was a very, very important thing. This is an important thing to the state of New Hampshire and an important thing to the city. And I will say this to you, I had hernia surgery on Friday, and today is the first day I'm vertical in almost a week. And I say that in part so that you don't make me laugh, but also in part to tell you that that's how important I think this is, and that I think that this is such a critical function to what we're doing and what's going on. What we want to do is something that's in the best interest of the city and in the best interest of the state. And I don't want you to think, I also mentioned the hernia surgery because at some point I got in trouble for not calling Mike Mortensen back. And none of us really want that. And I need an excuse. But, and so that's a thing. I think I want to talk about the city and the state. And I want to say this as if we're not separate entities, because we simply aren't. And that this is, we have at every step of the process tried to talk as much as we can to people involved in the process of the sale. You don't talk about everything. Councilor Joe Kenny in the back of the room has been very involved in this process. I think, frankly, going back to the study committee in the 2010s, right? And then Mayor Hosmer has obviously been a good partner to us and been a good discussion, and Dean has been vital as well. But I want to say this: there is nothing that is in the interest of the city that is not also in the interest of the state. And there is nothing in the interest of the state that is not also in the interest of the city. We're not two separate entities, we're one entity. We both work for the people of the region, the people of the city, the people of the state of New Hampshire. We've approached this from the beginning from that way. it's critical, and I think it's not possible that we could go down a different route. And you'll see that when we talk about the future for the city, the future of the project, and where we're going with it. And some very smart people are going to talk to you about what's going on. I will stay till the end of the meeting. I know there are various things planned for the meeting. I'll stay to the end of the meeting, if only so you have somebody to slap around. That's my role here. And to answer any questions you can. One of the things we're not going to talk about today, and I just want to set some of this down, we're not going to talk about the financials. And in part because this is an active negotiation. We're going to talk to you about the active negotiation we're undergoing with a development plan that I think is exciting, interesting, and wonderful, and beyond many of our dreams. But it's a bit cart before the horse, right? Normally there would not be a public presentation at this point. The governor was actually very insistent, though, that before something, he didn't want to end up going to governor and council with a purchase and sales agreement where there was not at some point a public discussion in the early in the stages. I think this completely freaked out Jared, who's our lawyer, whose job is to constantly be freaked out. You're gonna get tired of me saying that, aren't you? But it's normally not the way a process would work, but we wanted to have this discussion early in the process, not later in the process. And so I want to say that, and I'm going to introduce in whatever order they would want the team that's going to tell you exactly what we're talking about. But I want to thank you for turning out, and thank you for your interest as well.
Charlie, do you want us to get started?
Yeah, anybody go.
Yeah, and just, I think it would help to set expectations for this presentation. My colleague Mark Beasled and I, we're going to talk about the development concept and vision. Mark's going to touch a little bit on the process and how we got to this place. As Charlie said, that the purpose of this meeting is to introduce the concept, to gauge the response to it. Mark and I will not answer questions, okay, about the presentation, but after we present, I think there's going to be an open forum for people to talk and ask questions, or at least discuss ideas. Another sort of action item or next step from this presentation will be an ability to write comments directly to the governor and the executive council based on what you hear tonight. So that'd be good just to share that. So when we finish and then we don't answer questions, I don't want, feel like we don't want to. So Mark, why don't you get started?
Thanks, Trady. And thank you, Dean and Commissioner. My name is Mark Beasled. I'm with CBRE's Public Institutions and Educations team, along with Trady. And we're very excited to be here tonight presenting this redevelopment plan for the Lakes Region facility. It's an incredible opportunity, as the Commissioner said, for both the city, also the state, the entire Lakes Region facility, Lakes Region community. And we hope you see this proposal as living up to the potential for this amazing site that we're talking about. Our agenda for tonight, Dean, if you just skip to the next one, just at a high level, is to give a walkthrough of the background of this particular part of the journey on the property, sort of starting from the mandate last summer. And then we'll give an overview of the review process, sort of the steps the state has taken to examine the proposals and the offers we've received. And then Trady will present the actual redevelopment proposal and the next steps as discussed. So just for the next slide, again, thank you. So for the background here, this iteration began in July of 2021 when the legislature granted the governor and executive council sole discretion in the disposal or the sale of the Lakes Region facility. The governor tasked the Department of Administrative Services with marketing the property and facilitating the sale. Later that month, DAS issued a competitive solicitation for real estate broker services. CBRE was fortunate enough to be selected later in the fall of last year. And then fast forward to March of 2022, earlier this year, CBRE and our partner Bulos embarked on a comprehensive regional, national, and global campaign to try to bring awareness to this property that sort of befit its place in the community. So the goal was to make sure any and all potential participants saw the opportunity, were able to evaluate it, and hopefully participate in the process. Over the summer, we issued a call for offers. We received our initial offers and proposals on August 19th. After some internal review and discussion, we requested and received updated and improved proposals at the end of last month, September 30th. This month has been spent dedicated to the review and evaluation process that I'll touch on in the next slide. If you don't mind, Dean, 2 more. Thank you very much. The Department of Administrative Services convened a technical review committee. And this committee evaluated both the original and the improved offers, proposals through a sort of holistic, comprehensive lens. So it wasn't just looking at purchase price and the terms and conditions of the sale, but also the development vision, experience, and financial capability of the responding groups. The committee ranked these proposals and these offers and recommended those rankings to the governor. The governor agreed with, accepted the rankings, and then, as the commissioner mentioned, directed us to publicly present the redevelopment plan to the Laconia community here tonight and get the written comments that Trouty was talking about. As he said, we're really focusing on the concept and the vision for the site as opposed to the financials that are still under negotiation. The final step, once a final selection has been made, will be the governor and executive council authorizing the team and the department to negotiate a purchase and sale agreement for the sale and redevelopment of the property. Trouty will talk about the redevelopment plan.
So twice there, Dean. So thank you, Mark. As Mark explained, the marketing campaign that was led by CBRE and our partner firm on this project, the Bullis Company, it culminated in a call for offers August 18 of this year. 4 proposals were received. They were all reviewed by the Technical Evaluation Committee, and there was a recommended finalist that's pending selection of award by the governor and the executive council. As I mentioned before, the purpose of tonight's presentation is to share the vision and the concept, i.e. the program that's being proposed to the state for the site. It's a mixed-use development comprised of residential, commercial space for retail and office, resort, convention center use, pharmaceutical, healthcare type use, and then open space recreational use. So from the proposal itself, the developer expressed in terms of a vision, expressed the desire to preserve the natural beauty of the site, also to preserve as many of the historic structures on the site as possible. At the same time, this project will increase the tax base, hopefully promote opportunities for economic development, create jobs, and address some of the growing needs of the senior population. Conceptually, the developer has described the project as a self-sustaining village that is truly an extension of the local community of Laconia and the Lakes region. It is intended to be an ungated, open project, accessible to all. In fact, from the proposal, the only gate that we saw referenced in the proposal was for the public dog park that's available to everybody, not just the occupants of the project. The developer also in the proposal made a point to emphasize, obviously they want to emphasize the natural beauty of the site, but also not to ignore some of the past history of the site. It's associated with the school for the feeble-minded, and then later as a state prison. To that end, the housing element that we'll show in the next slide is intended to be accessible to all income levels. The historic buildings that will be preserved will mostly be repurposed for multifamily and single-family homes, where people, as the developer said, can live with dignity and pride. One last sort of element about the vision for this project is, I think it's important to note that at least 50% of the site is going to be preserved as open space for recreational use. The developer thought it very, very important to say that none of the existing uses on the site that the community already enjoys will be replaced or diminished. Rather, those uses should be augmented. And the hope is that additional types of recreational use can be identified with input from the local community. So, Dean, can you? So when we go through the program, you'll see all the uses are labeled approximate. And that's just because it's pending approvals. But I think it's important to point out that of all the proposals, the committee was most impressed with the amount of due diligence that was performed by the developer. Really, I think confirming in our minds the market feasibility of the project. So with the housing component that you see here, it's almost approximately 1,300 units. Okay, of those 300 and, excuse me, I have my glasses on here. 340 will be either single family, duplex, or triplex homes. There will be 108 condominiums, 500 multifamily apartment units, and 350 townhomes. Okay, of the multifamily apartments, 120 will be designated workforce housing, and at least 170 of the duplex and triplex units will be entry-level homes. Separate from the housing program is the senior housing mix that will add an additional 590 units. Of this, 360 will be used as independent senior living homes, and 230 will be assisted care units described as middle market. The commercial component here, I think it's labeled on the slide as retail. It's supporting use to, and it's accretive to the rest of the development program. It is commercial, office, and or retail. And I'll explain a little bit more on the next slide. Some of the healthcare component that the developer has identified is going to really be encapsulated or incorporated into this 200,000 square feet of proposed use. From the proposal, the developer stressed that it's not their intent just to go in and bulldoze and demolish the site and put in or cram as many single family homes as possible. Doing so would not meet the needs of the community, nor would it preserve the natural beauty of the site. Again, in the words of the developer. The developer wants and intends to construct a destination village that unifies both the site and the surrounding community instead of separating the two. Or as another way to put it, it's a village that embraces the public rather than a gated neighborhood that keeps others out. If you go to the next slide. On this slide is a further description of the program. And again, I just want to remind that the density that is shown here is approximate. It's still pending, but again, I think these are legitimate numbers based on the amount of work and due diligence performed by this group. You'll see here that there is a destination resort that will be designed to be available to people of all ages and abilities, as well as a convention center. The resort is going to be about 250 keys or rooms. And the convention center, it will be designed to support up to 1,000 visitors. In terms of the healthcare component mentioned in the mix of uses, really that is captured in the commercial retail housing program from the previous slide. It includes such uses as urgent care, pharmacy, childcare, and memory care type uses. Dean, could you go? Thank you. Wanted to emphasize that the open space component. The site is 217 acres. Multiple times in the proposal, at least 50% of this site is going to be retained as open space for recreation use. The use is shown on this slide. Some are existing, others are possible suggestions from the developer. As I mentioned before, many of these are just enhancements of amenities that are already available on the site. Many of the others have been suggested or identified, I think, through public discourse here locally. But either way, the developer hopes during the permitting process that this is a real opportunity to engage the community, because I know there has been a lot of different opinions expressed about how this site could be used, at least in terms of recreation. As far as these uses, we talked about the dog park. The grand field below is a large open space area that's designed for community gatherings, such as fairs, festivals, and farmers markets. There's also a proposed entertainment venue. And again, the proposal wanted to stress this is not meant to be of the same magnitude, or certainly not rivaling or competing with the Bank of New Hampshire Pavilion. But instead, it was really the thought is to provide an outlet for smaller and more local performers to have a place where they could perform. Other proposed amenities for sports and recreation, as you can see here, a zip line, climbing wall, trails for hiking and snowmobiling. And again, developer wants to program this space with the help of the local community. You can go to the next slide. Next step. So next steps. I mentioned that I think the format tonight is going to be after we're done speaking. It's going to be sort of an open forum to express opinions, positive or perhaps negative, but to share your thoughts. But also, and that is something that will sort of, I guess, gauge the reaction and the general sentiment of the public. But written comments really should be directed to the email address shown here on this slide. And that will go directly for review by the governor and executive council.
Could you state it? It's not visible.
You can't see it.
The resolution is very low.
RPDAS.
RPDAS at das.nh.gov.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. And I'm having trouble actually reading. Mark, you just have the next steps as far as the process and what.
Yes. So the next steps, kind of what the commissioner outlined before, are making a final selection and negotiating the purchase and sale agreement, and then finally executing the purchase and sale agreement with the selected developer party. So it's really just kind of running through the remainder of the sales process once the written community feedback is received.
And that concludes our presentation of the proposal that we identified as the preferred proposal for review by the governor and the executive council.
Does anybody want to, I suppose, Dean, is it possible just to open the floor at this point? Let anybody say anything they want or ask anything they want? I'm sorry, you might have had a different idea.
Yeah,
Okay,
I did.
what I meant to say is, why don't you tell us what we should do next?
There's a few parameters that I wanted to go through first, if you don't mind, and then we'll get to it. Sure.
not designed to do this very often this way, but anyway. I want to emphasize that basically what has been outlined has been the plan for several years. We didn't know exactly what the proposed plan was going to be or the development was going to be. We now have a very good idea, but as Commissioner Arlinghouse mentioned, Lake Shore Redevelopment Committee has been at this for more than 4 years. Before that, there were other committees, and there was always some type of variation that this was kind of the plan that the city was going for. Now, I want to recognize that in the course of various committees over the years, there have been other thoughts presented. They were heard, they were considered. But between the city council and the state and the various committees, the plan basically is what you see. And that's what's been going on. Again, I want to do a shout out, just like the commissioner did, to Lakeshore Redevelopment Commission, established more than 4 years ago. They did numerous studies which are going to be used by any prospective developer. And they even created a conceptual master plan, which, though not binding, certainly showed a number of people what could occur on the site, how much space there was, and what the different kinds of uses could be. The commission also had all the wetlands delineated on the property, which turned out to be a little more extensive than some people thought there would be, but they're all delineated. The historic buildings have been categorized and studied. We have reports on their website about that. Hazardous wastes have been located on the property. The good news, it's very, very little. There's a few spots where there is some agricultural pesticide type residue from way back when. And there are a couple of waste sites, dump sites, where people just threw their trash over the years that needs to be taken care of. But there is very little of concern. There is no biohazards, there are no petroleum hazards, there's none of those things. So that's a very good news and saves a lot of time for any future development. And the site has been completely surveyed. Previous committees in the past, as I mentioned, have also contributed. The city has been involved with the commission, has been involved with previous efforts. The city has been involved in a couple of outreach programs that the Lakeshore Redevelopment Commission did, and we had input sessions. So I want to move on about zoning and a few other rules that go with this property. Currently, it is zoned RR1 and RR2. Simply put, for those of you who don't know our lingo, that's 2-acre single-family zoning with very restricted commercial uses. There are a few possibility of commercial uses, but it's very restricted. This was done on purpose about 10 years ago to try to preserve the site for future development. There were people in the city who said, we don't want to have somebody go up there and divide off a little house lot here and a little house lot there, and et cetera, and completely degrade the property. That has not occurred. The state has maintained ownership all this time. And, but we must recognize the underlying zoning. The new Laconia Master Plan that was adopted in 2018 included the concept of performance zoning to be applied. The performance zoning has been applied to the property and a few selected surrounding properties. Performance zoning has also been applied to other areas of the city, not just this area, but it was generally recognized about 4 years ago that if anything significant was going to happen on the property, that obviously the zoning needs to change, and performance zoning was the mechanism that planning board and city council has chosen to pursue development. I'll talk a little bit about the Laconia planning process. When the prospective developer takes actual ownership of the property, which I've heard different timelines, so I'm not going to say what they are, but it's not happening tomorrow, and it's not happening probably not within 6 months. It's probably a little bit longer time frame than that before they actually take ownership of the property. But once they do, they will be 100% under the Laconia zoning ordinance, planning board process, site development, subdivision regulations, and performance zone. It's be a privately owned piece of property, just like any other privately owned piece of property in the city, and which means they will follow the rules. The process that we have with any large development is the planning department and other departments as appropriate or as needed in the city will review prospective plans with the developer on usually an iterative type basis. In particular is Department of Public Works is very involved, street drainage and traffic flow and those kinds of things. But we also get the fire department involved and when appropriate, other departments. So during this iterative early process, this is a time for the city to negotiate with the developer. Yes, you want to have whatever number they arrive at, 1,300 units of housing. That's great. What we want in return, though, is a commitment for this, and this. And that's an important part of the process, and one that I expect will occur. One of the things that has already been committed to, but we will also reiterate and repeat over and over, is creating affordable housing. Now, affordable housing, in our definition of this, is not, and repeat, not Section 8. It could include a few federal programs, tax incentives, et cetera, but we are talking about houses that our teachers can afford to buy, our firefighters can afford to buy, an electrician can afford to buy, et cetera. This is not low rent housing. Now, there may be some of that here, but not necessarily, that's not the goal. When we say affordable housing, we are talking about, and I hate to say this number because I know most people are going to go, that's not affordable, but in today's market, today, we are talking about 200 to 350,000, depending upon the size of the unit, what type of unit it is, et cetera. I will point out to you that when I came to the city 5.5 years ago, the average construction price for a new home was $150 a square foot. That doesn't include the price of the land. It doesn't include the appliances that get put in the kitchen. It doesn't include all of those little things. It's to construct the house. Today, that number is over $250 a square foot. So when you have that 1,000 square foot ranch that some of us grew up in, myself included, that's $250,000 just to build the house. So when we say affordable housing, unfortunately, that's what that means. The first step for this process, this project, is going to be a conceptual plan presented to the planning board. And this may take more than one meeting. The idea of a conceptual plan is not to show us where every sewer line or water line or every property line is going to be, but rather over here we're going to have use X and it's going to be approximately this size. Over here we're going to have use Y and it's going to be consisting of this number of units of housing. And over here we're going to have use Z, and it'll be this, it'll be that. Over here, we have the historic buildings that we hope will be restored and reused, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the concept plan. Once the planning board approves the concept plan, that triggers performance zone. That's the first step to do performance zone. Under performance zoning, the planning board is empowered, and I cannot emphasize that word enough, to grant approvals to normal regulations that they would not normally be able to do all by themselves. They can approve higher density than would be allowed under underlying zoning. They can approve different setbacks that maybe would be required, heights of buildings, uses. As you heard, we're going to have the potential of some type of resort, some type of commercial property. That is generally kind of thing that is not allowed in the RR1 district. So therefore, you need performance zoning to do those things. One thing that performance zoning does not give any relief to is wetlands. The wetlands must be maintained, and the buffer that we have in our ordinance around those wetlands has to be maintained. Performance zoning cannot affect wetlands or the buffers. Once performance zoning is kicked in, they start doing a specific site plan. Again, probably iterative. Sit down with departments, talk about what needs to be done, and again, some negotiation. And this is where the city almost definitely will be hiring specialized help. We would hire an engineering company to do what's called a third-party review on, say, stormwater management, third-party review on their utilities, water and sewer, et cetera. We would certainly require a traffic study to be done to project the amount of traffic that may be generated by this project of this magnitude, and what needs to be done off-site. Obviously, as soon as the traffic pulls out of right-way drive or whatever roads are going to be created, that has to be managed, and it has to be probably some improvements to the road system up in the area of the intersection of Elm and Parade and the intersection of North Main and Route 106, and perhaps even further out than that. And they would be responsible for these offsite improvements that need to be done to support the amount of traffic. Once we have a site plan, we're back to the planning board. I cannot emphasize enough that there will be meetings, not one meeting, but meetings. Abutters will be notified. Public hearings will be held, and a word about abutters. Abutters are defined by New Hampshire state law, basically a property that touches this property or is across the street from this property, or if there was a river here, across the river. There's not a river, so it'll be all the properties surrounding the state school property, properties on Eastman Road, properties on Meredith Center Road, potentially properties on potentially North Main Street. May not be any houses there, but there are property owners there. However, so we're legally obligated to notify abutters every time we're going to have a public hearing. That does not limit the public hearing to abutters. Anybody in the community can come to the planning board meetings, voice their opinion at the appropriate time. To put a plug in for the city's website, we have a sign up mechanism on the city website that will notify you when the board of your favorite choice is meeting, and you'll get a notice of that meeting and what's on the agenda. So if you are interested in planning board meetings, sign up for the notification to get the notices for the planning board meeting. You know, we don't send any other emails. It's very, very user-friendly. And, you know, if it doesn't pertain to you and you don't care, then it's a quick delete. But this is, if you're in another part of the city and not a direct abutter to this property, this is the way for you to find out for sure whether there's a meeting or not. There will be multiple meetings, multiple public hearings. This is not going to occur overnight. There will be other boards involved. Heritage Commission is going to be looking at many structures that are up there that are considered historic, that meet the criteria for them to review. The Conservation Commission will be involved. Even though performance zoning does not give any relief to wetlands, there are still other conservation issues that need to be resolved on the property. Could also include action by the city council. After planning board approval, the approval could be done in phases. This is very common for larger developments. The developer at the initial approval, not initial meeting, but initial approval, will indicate what their phases are. We're going to do this section and this section first, and then 2 years later, we're going to do this section and this section. That is all part of the approval process. If they need to make a change in those phases, we thought we were going to put houses over here, but we're not. We're going to put retail over here. They would have to go back to the planning board and have that reviewed and approved, modified once again, and we repeat the process. Public hearings, butter notices, etc. All right, that's my presentation. Thank you for your attention and your understanding. And at this point in time, we've got questions. So we'll do questions. I will say one thing. I can't do that, right? I can't stand there, right? Well, no, we can go to the camera. Okay, all right, let me get rid of this. Okay. Okay. I can almost guarantee that we're going to get questions that we can't answer. You know, you've heard some of the parameters that the commissioner and the folks in CBRE have said. There are still a high number of confidentiality issues concerning the proposal. And so, but by all means ask, and we'll let you know whether we can answer or not. We also may not be able to answer because we don't know. And as I tell my staff all the time, I don't know, but we'll find out is a perfectly good answer to any question that you get from a customer. So with that, you have a question.
Is Ahern Park excluded from this plan?
Is Ahern Park excluded from this plan? Absolutely, positively, yes. There's the
From the
property.
state standpoint, I am on. I want to add this, it absolutely has to be. We actually have a memorandum of agreement with the park itself, that not only is it excluded from the sale, but we have to preserve access to 106 to it. So the access will either be preserved the way it is today, which would be technically across the property we're selling, or maybe directly to 106. We would have that discussion, but the state cannot sell the property without preserving access to the park and without excluding the park from the sale.
And I think this is one of those items where when we're discussing the nitty gritty with the developer, that we're going to say, oh, by the way, wouldn't it be great if you could do some improvements to Ahern State Park? Maybe a bathhouse, or maybe we improve the trails, or I don't know what they will be. I'm just making suggestions. I don't want anybody to go, oh no, I don't want a bathhouse down there, whatever. I'm just making suggestions, but that is the kind of thing that when we get into the nitty gritty with it, that an offsite improvement that's a possibility. All right. Any other questions, Jake?
At the beginning, there was a lot of interest in agriculture and farming. Has that been ruled out? That aspect?
I would say in general, yes. I think I would go back to the early part of my comments where there have been a number of suggestions by a number of people that they have been considered. I think that there is an opportunity for a few places on the property for the developer to perhaps do a community garden type thing or something along that line, but I would not expect there to be a farm or a place where you grow crops in large quantities or anything like that.
So the agricultural buildings will be repurposed for something else or not used at all?
Correct. The agricultural buildings could very well be fixed up, reused. They may become part of the commercial square footage or repurposed for other things. Yeah.
What about the water towers that are there, the water system?
The developer understands that essentially all of the utilities need to be replaced on that property, the sewer, the water, and that they need to build a new water tower. To not only serve their property, but now we will have a water tower and pressure that could serve a substantial distance down Meredith Center Road and Eastman Road and potentially along Winnisquam on Eastman Shore or Layton, and a little bit way up Parade, but you start getting into some altitude there, so that's going to be a problem. But yes, they understand that all of that needs to be done. The water availability is there at the intersection of North Main and Parade Road. The infrastructure is old, it's collapsing, it needs to be replaced.
Will there be 2 points of egress and ingress at least on this?
2 points of ingress, you mean like traffic?
Correct.
Too early to tell. I would anticipate that will be the case. I know that a couple of years ago, when we were talking about the master plan that the Lakeshore Redevelopment Committee did, we talked about the possibility now of a roundabout at the intersection of North Main and Parade Road and the new road. Mostly because having two major traffic lights as close together as they would be could be problematic. But certainly the outlet to Eastman Road would more than likely be maintained, or it could be rerouted to maybe Meredith Center, or I think it would be highly unlikely that there would be one in and one out, but at this point in time, too early to tell. Peter.
Thank you very much. For those of you who don't know, I'm Peter Burnett, I'm the chair of the planning board. It's very good to hear you tonight. I have a bunch of questions for Dean, but we'll have an opportunity in a couple of weeks to answer those probably. I want to thank Commissioner Arlinghouse for coming out as a wounded warrior this evening. Oh, sorry, I made you laugh.
Okay.
Hope it didn't hurt. I don't know if Commissioner Bald is here or.
Yes, he is.
Certainly, that's good. Good to see you. Commissioner Spanos, who served on the,
And Commissioner McClear.
yeah, and Mr. McClare came in, yes. And I think they all need to be commended for the work they did. The master plan we have here. My question for CBRE, you said all the current uses on the property will be preserved. Is that certain?
I think, frankly, as a broker, as our broker, I'd like to ask them not to reply directly to things like that, but it is our intention as part of the sale to preserve all current uses of the property.
Okay.
And current access. to it.
Has a successful applicant developer been selected?
Yes.
Yes, okay. And is it
I
that
should say that
developer?
nominally, in a legal, technical way, until the governor,
Understood.
yeah, but yes.
It has to go through governor and council.
Yeah,
and
but one has been selected and we
Okay,
hope that they will agree with us.
That's good to know, because that speeds things up a bit.
That's our goal.
Was the master plan developed by the Lake Shore Redevelopment Planning Commission utilized in the work that was done by CBRE? Did you use the master plan?
All of those documents were made available to the bidder, to all of the bidders.
Okay. But were they given any weight? In other words, I don't know the process, if it was an RFP, if you,
We, I can help with that. We extended a call for offers out and various people made various offers. I think people will know that there were dozens of groups, literally, there are probably more than 100 different groups that downloaded documents that looked at what we want to call due diligence documents. Most of that is the commission's documents.
sure.
That's why I said that we wouldn't be here without them. I would say that more than a dozen different entities visited the property, made serious offers, came in or made serious consideration. In many cases, came in and made presentations to me or to various and sundry people. A lot of them had discussions directly with the city. In the end, the fact that there were 4 serious offers that were made is not a reflection that other people didn't consider. It's a complicated piece of property.
Sure.
I don't think, and I think all of those people would tell you, the ones who made offers and didn't, that the foundation of their work, the foundation of what they considered for the property started with the planning, the combined documents, frankly, of the planning commission.
So the commission also recommended that this development be phased, and they totaled the sum $12 million worth of infrastructure improvements over 3 phases, if I'm not mistaken. Will this new development be phased?
I don't think you can anticipate that there would be any kind of significant development that doesn't happen in phases. And so absolutely.
Because I am concerned, and I'm sure many in the city are, that if these are not phased, the stages, it will overwhelm the ability of the city's planning department and its land use boards without extensive outside professional help.
I think I would agree with that. And I think that we certainly anticipate that. And I think I think one thing to understand is that all of the successful and unsuccessful, frankly, bidders have a real sense that, well, there are a couple things, right? So when the state owns the property, one of the things about being the state is that, you know, technically the zoning rules and regulations are not technically applicable. I want to be careful how I say that.
We're aware of that.
I know you are aware of that.
Yes.
One of the great things from the city standpoint, and every developer understands this, is that they're buying the property. We're not retaining an
Yep.
interest in it. And that suddenly means that the city's in the driver's seat, and everybody gets that.
Okay, city's in the driver's seat. You said earlier, we're all in the same bus.
We are.
Okay, so does that mean that the state is going to be paying for infrastructure improvements both on and off the site?
It is not the city, it's the part of the process, part of what the state has been trying to do as part of this whole process is to move the property from the state interest to a developer's interest,
Right.
who would work in partnership with the localities and all the rules around it. And the goal of that is that the state is not well disposed historically to be a development partner in the properties that it owns. I don't think that any locality would disagree with that. And it's not what we do best. It's not who we are, and it's not who we're ever going to be, frankly. Whether we should be or shouldn't be, it's not who we're going to be.
I
And
understand.
so we want to move it away from us.
The
to a
state will
private
be the
home.
seller, the state will receive a payment. The legislature will want to use every penny to decrease tax liabilities, I'm sure, and meet existing obligations. But some part of that money that the state receives for the sale of the property should in good conscience be used to do infrastructure improvements both on and off the property, because it's going to change the whole character of the west quadrant of the city in a zone that we have been talking about but haven't rezoned. And that process alone could take us a year. That's just, in
I
the
don't-
meantime, the state will
don't-
get their check. and-
I don't disagree with how that works, but one of the things to understand is that there are natural costs that will occur to the state as a result of this. One of them is the E911 Lakes Region Mutual Aid building, which will have to be moved, and well, the building will be moved,
Oh, yeah.
but the operation will be relocated, and it's the nature of the land swap.
Plus, of course, all the closing costs,
Pardon me?
plus the closing costs.
Plus the closing costs, thank
Yeah.
you,
That would be up to you too, wouldn't it? So,
something like that.
thank you, Commissioner.
Sure.
Thank you to everyone in the room that served on the commission.
Up back there against the window.
Thank you for everyone who put so much work into this over the many years. Regarding performance zoning, you mentioned that there were properties adjacent to or other parcels that would be subjected to. I wanted to understand two things. I think the state just articulated this well. So RR1 and RR2, is that completely gone now, and is that replaced
No.
by? So is performance zoning something that's kind of performed ad hoc with the default to RR1 and RR2? And then what are the other properties adjacent to the property that will be subjected to performance zoning?
So the RR1 and RR2 does not go away. It just, once the developer qualifies for performance zoning, it's not applied to that property. So the 217 acres of the state property would not be subject to RR1, RR2. It would be subject to performance zoning. Performance zoning in that area includes what's known as the McIntyre property, which is across Meredith Center Road, the little triangular, well, it's not little, it's like 15 acres, something like that. That's across the street on Meredith Center Road. It also includes the triangular piece of land that's at the intersection of Old North Main and Parade Road. That's basically a field right now, not the conservation area. This is the southerly side of Old North Main Street. Also includes a couple of properties further down Parade Road. And you probably can't see it, but on the map over here, there's a big red blotch that's just south of the state school property, which is currently zoned commercial. Is also covered by the performance zoning, and there's a couple of small little properties in the middle there as well. Other parts of the city that have performance zoning is Court Street, Union Avenue, the downtown area, and parts of the Weirs Beach area. But it doesn't mean that it's automatically applied. You have to start the process, use the process, and it is applied on a parcel by parcel basis.
The performance zoning overlay district does not include RR1 and RR2.
It includes the properties that I just mentioned. Enacted in 2019. Yes, ma'am.
So I heard that you received 4 RFPs, is that correct?
Yes,
Yes.
And besides the financials that you cannot talk about, you have criteria for the developers that are proposing this, so that you ensure that we have a qualified developer to handle the multi.
yes, actually, it's of particular interest to the state. One thing we don't want to be left is holding a bag, so to speak, when everything is over. And I think everybody's aware of that going in. We relied to a large extent on CBRE to look at the qualifications of the interested parties, of the people who were proposing where they would go. There were a number of people who looked at things, and we feel very confident that the experience and the financial wherewithal of the chosen party is actually really quite strong. And it's a significant criteria. We're very interested in the vision. And I don't want to minimize that because the vision is really important. It's important that there be a vision for the property. This is not an auction. We're not trying to unload a piece of property for whatever price we can. I think it's a notion of trying to find something that works really well for, the highest and best use of the piece of property. But in addition to that, it was critical to us, and I think it would have been to anybody, that we're selecting somebody who can do this. It's not enough to have a vision. You have to have the ability to do it. And if I'm honest, we feel very, very confident. And that's not based on me going, yeah, I think it kind of would work. It's based on a lot of very smart people who had a lot of meetings with them. And it's not just our brokers, but I don't want to put him on the spot. I know Rusty has met with people and it was just a little bit more about how to develop things than say I do, which isn't a high bar to get over. We relied on that sort of advice and that sort of experience from a number of people who looked at it from many different angles. So we felt very confident.
Thank you.
I have two quick questions. The first one, in terms of residential, will the person own just the dwelling or the dwelling and the land?
So concerning residential, I don't think we know that at this
Okay.
moment. I think it's easy to envision that some of it may be delineated as a condo, in which case the usual condo type stuff applies. You have common areas and limited common areas, and you own things in conjunction with your neighbors. It could be a homeowners type association type situation. It could be just single family lots. It could be apartment buildings, in which case, it's an apartment building. So I don't think we definitely do not know the details of that at this moment.
And my second question is this presentation available on the city site?
It is not at the moment, and I will defer as to whether it could be or not.
We're happy to send you the slides.
I haven't. Yep, we'll get it posted.
That would be good.
Can we have these slides from tonight too?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yep. Yes, sir.
A significant development like this is going to reduce jobs, which is great. How much thought has been given to finding people to fill these jobs, or to some kind of workforce development collaboration to provide the training to local people such that they would be qualified for the number of jobs that you're going to use?
That's the $64,000 question. It's no secret that everyone's having trouble hiring people at any level, whether it be flipping burgers or whether it be engineering people or whatever. I have 2 openings in my department right now, and we're looking. So yeah, I get that. I will say, and I don't think this is probably comforting to most people, but I will say that when it comes to major construction projects, construction workers are used to traveling great distances to do their work. 50, 60-mile commute is not unusual for someone who's a steel worker or that kind of a situation. It's an issue. It's an issue for everybody. It's quite possible that we can work with Lakes Region Community College and do some type of training programs or whatever. I know the state has funds available for a variety of those kinds of things. And again, this is not happening, in the next 6 months. So we have some time to try to do that.
And I was thinking not just of the construction jobs, but of the long-term jobs, the employees that are going to run and maintain the facility.
Yeah.
And it would seem that it would be incumbent also or beneficial to the developer to contribute in some way to not just to rely on the state to train workers that can work in there.
I think that from my standpoint, I would say that I'm glad that hear you focus on the sort of long-term jobs, because I think it's something that we're all interested in, and the opportunities. I think from the developer standpoint that they're almost certainly not looking to the state to fill in gaps for them. We've tried to be clear from the beginning about that there's not a gap issue. That it's not who we're going to be. This is New Hampshire, and people sort of get that. I think that they understand the vision of a self-sustaining village. They understand the needs and their wishes in that respect. There are ebbs and flows in job cycles, and there always are. And I'd say this is the department that has the state's division of personnel in it, and a 20% vacancy rate. Nonetheless, we're hiring people every day, and thousands of people a year, and we lose people and we hire people. And I think that the construction side, we have an ability to get contracts done with local contractors who work. We have people who are always looking, and I think that everybody understands how much of a challenge it is right now on the labor market. There's some continual good news on the labor market when we see the numbers going up, and the number of employed people, I think, is back to slightly more than pre-pandemic levels. And so there's reason for optimism there, but I think the developer understands the need for that to work out, and isn't thinking, well, we'll create the stuff and you go find people for us, because that's just not going to be how it'll work.
I mean, it would seem that one of the benefits to the town would be a higher skilled workforce as a result of this development happening. People without jobs now get jobs and learn skills, and therefore we have a more qualified workforce.
I do hope so.
I mean, one of the things that we are dealing with right now, presently, is we have a number of people who live in the city and commute out for their jobs, whether they're higher paying or it's whatever the job is, and it's just not available here, whatever the circumstances are. But we also have a large number of people who live outside of the city that commute in. And one of the reasons that occurs, actually, there's two general reasons. The first one is they've always lived in San Martin, or they've always lived in Northfield or whatever. So therefore, that's where they are. But it also is they can't find a place that they can afford in the city. So therefore, the potential of this development is that we are creating some affordable houses. And so maybe some of the people who are now commuting into the city to work at Lakes Regional Hospital or up in the industrial park or wherever it is, that they will move into the city. That would be one goal. Pat.
The most recent large development that we've had is Southdown and Long Bay, and that was developed sort of in pods. Different developers came in. Is that part of your contemplation here, that there might be different developers who would develop certain parts of this? And if so, would the overall developer still have some responsibility to the city to make sure the beginning site plan is followed to the best of its abilities?
So my answer would be no, that's not our vision. Our vision is to sell the property to a developer. And that is what we intend to do. And that I do understand that sometimes pods make sense. And I don't know the considerations that went into that, and maybe it does make sense. It's not our concept here. And the part of the attractiveness of the proposal is that there's a cohesive vision, and it's not a segmented one. And I think we find that particularly attractive.
In my discussions with the developer, and I had discussions with other developers, their intention was to do it all themselves. However, that does not mean that they can't partner with somebody and subdivide off a piece of land at some point in time. That
Really builds on the prior question of how financially stable is this proposed buyer? Can they do this project, which is a very large project anywhere?
the due diligence that has been done so far indicates that they can. Any other questions? Yes, sir, in the arch.
I didn't hear you mention the piece of property on 106 North between Old North Main Street and Elm Street that goes down to Lake Okeechee. What the intentions were for that piece?
No intention for that piece of property. That is under a covenant restriction, and it's, I forget, Lisa, you know which organization has that?
It's owned by the state of New Hampshire.
It's owned by the state of New Hampshire, but agreement is with the Department of Cultural and Natural Resources.
So
It is-
the forest land on the other
Down
side of the
the-
road.
Basically,
It's a
the meadow that goes down to Lake Okeechee.
Yep.
That property is not
Off the table.
not included in this proposal at all. It has never been part of the proposal or the studies or the developments. It is conservation managed now, and it will remain that way.
And there are community gardens on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one other question.
Yeah.
On 106 South from Meredith Center Road back towards Laconia, that low corner right there, what are the intentions for that? When I looked at that diagram that you had up there, it was very hard to see from here, but it looks like they're trying to maintain some of the woodland and stuff for that area.
Yes, and that is the area where there is some fairly significant wetland features.
And serious drainage issues also.
Yes, yes. So that is, wetlands need to be preserved, and they would not be encroached upon. And if there's other issues of that, where that water goes and what happens to it, that probably needs to be looked at as part of this development.
Yeah, like, you know, in past years, there were several properties down there on the Anthony Drive.
Yeah.
My house is actually across the street from that piece of parking lot, so I'm concerned about the drainage issues with this development.
Yep.
And I don't know, because I've been up through those woods, I can know it's pretty wet up through there.
Yeah, and we, and the city in general, Department of Public Works in particular, is very aware of the drainage issues on Anthony Drive and in that general area. Yep. Yes, sir. Did I see a hand? No, didn't see a hand. Anybody else? Yes.
Right now, the traffic concerns on that road are, I mean, if you're coming out of Industrial Drive, taking left towards Meredith, it's, depending on the time of day, it can be very difficult. Who is going to be responsible for financials of doing a traffic study and whatever needs to be done to upgrade the road to handle the additional traffic?
To do the study is an easy question to answer. It would be the developer. To do the off-site improvements becomes a little more complicated, but it's part of the process that we need to go through in discussions with them in conjunction with the state, because as soon as you get to the north of the Industrial Park Road or Lexington Drive, it turns into state. It's a state highway at that point in time, city, where they started the pavement a couple of months ago, where that new pavement is. That's where the state maintenance starts and the city ends, and that is true all the way up the rest of Parade Road and Meredith Center Road. Elm Street is city maintained. So it would be an iterative process, and it would, in my mind, my opinion, it's the cost of doing business.
Right.
Okay. Going back to Peter's comment about the utilities, they are very aware of what they need to install for utilities, not only on the property, but how those sources are going to get. They're very aware of that, and they included that in their proposal that they're aware of it and they will pay for it.
But have they included anything to deal with the traffic in their proposal?
I don't think there's anything specific in the proposal that deals with traffic, but that's part of our due process. That once they own the property, they're under City of Laconia rules and regulations. And one of the first things we're going to say is you got to go to a traffic study, which will project how much traffic there will be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, et cetera. And what does that mean for the various intersections with the roads, et cetera. And they're going to have to deal with it. They're causing it. They're going to have to deal with it, I guess is the one way to put it. Yes, Peter.
Just one more. Have there been discussions with the city council and the mayor about any capital outlays to improve infrastructure in that area in conjunction with this project? We've already heard the commissioner say that the state just wants to take the check, so we're gonna end up paying for.
I think you know that currently and previously, the past several months, the city council has been discussing issues with various utilities up in that area of the city.
Right.
And so they are very aware of the issues, and they have had discussions. I can't say one way or the other whether they've had discussions about this piece of property or not, because I'm not necessarily in the room every time. Most of the time I'm not. Let's put it that way. Steve.
Two questions. The first one is the entertainment portion of this development. Is it gonna in any way impact the investment we've done with the Colonial Theater? Because we have a significant investment in the Colonial Theater, and
I don't.
out of curiosity.
Yeah, I
if we
don't.
Put some entertainment that is gonna compete with our other investment.
I don't think we're aware of what the nature of the entertainment venue would be, and therefore I don't know that we can answer that question.
Number two, have we thought about the impacts on the schools that we have with the, hopefully it's gonna give us a positive impact on the population of the schools. But there's also going to be additional buses and stuff, since there's not really a close school by. And so is that being thought of, hopefully in the back of someone's mind?
Part of our development process is we have impact fees, and a significant portion of the impact fees go to the school department. This development would not be exempt from impact fees. Currently, a single family house is built in the city on a newly created lot. If you have an old lot that's been sitting there for 20 years or 50 years or whatever, that doesn't apply. But if a new lot is created, regardless of how it's created in a new unit, new single family house, it's $3,400, I believe, somewhere around that number, that they have to pay an impact fee. We have different numbers for multifamily units, townhouses, et cetera, because they all contribute differently. And one thing I will tell you, your concern about there being additional students is probably well-founded. However, I will tell you that in these days, a unit of housing does not create the level of students that it used to 30, 40 years ago. People don't have kids at the same rate. When I was a kid, there was 4 of us in school at the same time. The poor municipality was paying for the 4 of us, and my father's taxes were probably $300 a year. You know, I mean, it's just the way it is. You know, the average single-family house has, and I don't know the exact number, but it is something like 0.7 students per single-family house. Apartments, condos, et cetera, are even lower than that. That doesn't mean that they don't have children. It means they're not school-age children. They could be toddlers, they could be 18 or whatever. But, you know, for those numbers are for school-age children. So it's not the 3 or 4 kids per house that a lot of people think. And as you may know, the number of students in the Laconia School District has decreased every year for a number of years. Now, it's not drastic decreases. It's not like it's going from 2,000 to 1,500 in 1 year, but, you know, over the course of 10 years, the numbers have steadily gone down. And they just had an article in the paper. I believe we were down another 50 or 60 students this year versus last year type thing. So.
If anyone's particularly interested, Russ Tebow did some work on this about 15 years ago, which is actually very, very good and counterintuitive about the impact of development and school age kids. So I'm sure that's, I don't know exactly where to find it, but I'm sure that's out there somewhere.
Are there tax breaks or incentives included in the deal,
No,
city level?
Not at the moment. I mean, they can ask for anything. It's,
Okay.
could, whether it's approved or not is remains to be seen. Yes.
Yeah, I just had one question about the developer. I'm not sure if it can be answered or not, but you guys mentioned it was up to a global search. Can we know if the developer is based in New Hampshire or based in the United States, or what state or country the developer is from?
I don't think we're prepared to say that at this point what that is, and it's frankly, it's simply because of negotiations, where we are, and but I don't think anything will be shocking to anyone.
Marcia?
Just following up with, how about police and fire? That will be part of the study as well?
They are all sharing in the impact fees, you know, all every city department gets a certain percentage of the impact fee. You know, a lot of it goes to school, but a lot of it goes to DPW, some of it goes to fire, some goes to police, some goes to the library, some goes to Parks and Rec, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I would appreciate, since there were 4 proposals, if you could briefly state what the other proposals were the other 3 also like multi-family and commercial, or was there anything different?
I don't think, because it's a procurement process and a development process, I don't think I would be comfortable right now discussing what the other proposals were, just because, you know, technically all the proposals are alive until they're not. Although I think probably after we select and finalize a purchase, you know, it's something that we could revisit. I know it sounds like I'm trying to be coy, and I'm not. I'm very, the state has very definitive rules on procurement and confidentiality. I'm well aware that the only one of my predecessors who went to jail over procurement. And so I try to be careful.
Where does it go to GNC?
Our goal would be to get to GNC.
That's not the vitamin company, that's the governor and council.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Governor and council will ultimately approve the project. Our goal would be to be there in January. That's aggressive, but I'm pretty sure that the governor will have my head if I'm not aggressive.
He wouldn't do that to you.
We'll see.
Way in the back, sir.
Yes, I'd like to also thank everybody involved in this presentation and involved in this effort up until this point, and particularly the initial commission. It can't have been easy. I wouldn't have wanted the job, as I know there are about 1 million different opinions, and everybody's going to have an opinion about whether their particular, you know, favorite cause wasn't reflected or reflected enough. So thanks very much to everybody for this very clear presentation. My question is probably pretty obvious, and it kind of is a follow-up to the earlier question about capacity, which is right now, yes, it's not just that there's trouble with workers, but there's a lot of problems with inflation. There's a lot of problems with anticipating costs and how they're going to do with where they're really going to go, and materials. And I know a lot of agencies that are having a lot of issues doing very simple projects like a parking lot somewhere. And they've had to stretch out their timeline, and they've had to build all kinds of things in. So obviously I would think that will all be taken into consideration when you're doing your planning for something that's going to go on years and be in phases for something as complicated as this project. I know that's very obvious, but I thought I should mention it.
Yeah, no, it certainly is a consideration when the developer gets to the point where they're going to actually start construction. That's part of the challenge that they're going to have, for sure. Maybe in 6-9 months or a year that a lot of these shortages go away, but I mean, I'll snap my fingers and make it so, but I don't, that and 250 will get you a cup of coffee at most places. So, it is what it is. And you're right. I mean, right now, as strange as it seems, the shortage is concrete. Last month it was something else, and next month it'll be something else. But it's a moving target right now.
We believe one of the reasons to select a sophisticated development team is along those lines. And I'll point out that the proposals came in when inflation was well known, and no one thought it was a fleeting thing. There may have been a time when we thought inflation was a fleeting thing or hope, and I don't think that's where we are today. If you have a sophisticated enough team, they have to bake that in. And we feel comfortable that they are making it, and it's a consideration I think everybody has.
Two questions. One is, will the housing authority have an opportunity to meet with the potential buyer at some point to at least let them know that there is an interest in cooperating and working with them for providing affordable housing and some of the housing that is needed in the community? The second question is, for some of the infrastructure costs, has the state considered perhaps providing some financing for the developer for some of those costs? Or is that something that perhaps the state might want to consider to perhaps make this a more reasonable approach in the future?
The directive to us from the governor and the council and the legislature who passed the bill that directed us on how to sell this was not about offering financing or discussions with the BFA or anything like that about the authority, but was to select as good a developer as we possibly could that would be able to do the project without relying upon the state to be a partner. One of the directions that we felt like we received from the beginning was that we were not looking for, in terms of operationally, we were not looking for a partner. We did want someone who had a sense of partnership with the community, partnership with the state broadly writ, with the region broadly writ, but not an entity that was going to work in tandem with us, but somebody to whom we could turn over the risks and responsibilities and all of that. And so it's not something the state's considered, and it's something that we've not looked at doing for that reason.
And to the early part of the question, Pat, as you know, there are a number of federal programs out there that help people build housing, developers build housing. Various levels of subsidies, various financing methods. Some of those programs, some of those federal programs probably would require some type of involvement with the housing authority. Not necessarily all of them, but in a large number. And I'm sure that it would make sense to me that they would sit down and talk with whoever is in the community as a resource.
They have a great deal of expertise in some of those issues, and it'd be
Right.
nice to know that they do.
Yep. Yes, sir.
So the development would be 1 to 200 in an RR1, RR2, right? 1 to 200 units. You're talking about 1,300. So it's going to take a rural district to make it quite the opposite. Can you just explain the process that the city will go through in that performance zoning process to go from 1 to 200 to 1,300? And is it possible that the city says, no, we're going to keep it RR1 and RR2, but there's 1 to 200 units and that's all there is? Is that possible?
Anything is possible. I think I'll be blunt and say it's unlikely. That has not been the plan of the city or the Lakeshore Redevelopment Committee, or certainly not the state at this point in time. That is not the plan. The process is for the developer to give us a conceptual plan of the whole property. We go to the planning board. Planning board does its deliberation and its consideration of the concept. You know, again, going back to my earlier remark, it's not how big is the sewer line here, how big is the water line here, how big is that particular lot, how big is, you know, it's more high level concept of we're going to have some multifamily, we're going to have some retail, we're going to have some commercial, we're going to have a health facility of some kind, or, and they may be more specific than just some kind. They may tell you that it's a rehab hospital, or they may tell you it's a Clear Choice MD, or you know, whatever, I don't know. So then the concept gets approved, and then they go and they develop the entire site plan, which then includes water, sewer, lot lines, drainage, et cetera, et cetera.
Uses, heights, density.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, all of that. Yeah, number of units per property, and I don't know if you've been on the property. I was there again this afternoon. I've been on the property many times in the past 18 months or so. There are parts of the property, particularly in the center of the property, that you can't see from the streets. That is not rural. It is very dense building. A lot of those buildings surrounded by razor wire at the moment, but there are some very substantial buildings that are very close to one another, that in that section, that core of the property as it exists today, 30, 40 acres worth is, I would not characterize as rural. Certainly parts of that property to the outer edges is rural at the moment, you know, that without question.
So to get from where we are today to 1,300 units, it's going to go through the planning board, is that right? And
Yes.
is the state providing any of the money the planning board will need to evaluate a very complex proposal?
No, the developer provides the money. If we need to hire expert help, which we more than likely will, we do this on, we have done this several occasions in the past few years on even smaller projects. But when we do that, we choose the vendor, i.e. which engineering firm is going to do this and what consultant is going to do it. We choose those people and the developer pays for it.
Is there any contingency in the sale of this property that the planning board, you know, could say 1 to 200 properties and that's it, say R1, R2, is there any contingency that the developer can back out based on the decision of the planning board?
Our, I don't want to discuss the particulars of the financial, but the state is predisposed toward fewer contingencies rather than more.
Naturally would be. Just the point is, isn't the whole purpose for the developer to buy it to get a decision from the planning board that's favorable, right?
Yeah, I don't imagine that any developer would want to buy a piece of property where they didn't think they had a pretty good shot, at least a fair shot.
Any commitments already given?
No.
Any other questions? I'll follow Mr. Bogert's example and count off 10 seconds for anybody else that wants to think about asking a question. Or thank you very much for coming, and I appreciate everybody's comments and questions. Thank you.
Good seeing you.